for a long time today about this fiscal crisis, because I don't think anyone is looking at the looming deadline that's going to occur tomorrow night as something that we want to happen and government to shut down. I hope so much that the President and Speaker Boehner and the Democratic leader of the Senate, Senator Reid, can come to terms, because we are so close to having an agreement on a continuing resolution until the end of this fiscal year, which is what we need. No one would run a business the way this government is being run, in 2-week continuing resolutions and 1 week and 3 weeks. It is not the way to run anything. It's not organized, and you can't plan. And most certainly we know that taxpayer dollars are not being the most efficiently spent if we are going in 1 and 2 week increments. But the stakes are very high. I look back at the year 2000, before 9/11, and we had balanced budgets. We had a balanced budget in the year 2000. We had a balanced budget up until 9/11. That was only 10 years ago, and we ought to be able, as the United States Congress working with the President, to say, if we had a balanced budget 10 years ago, we can't possibly be so far over the line that we can't bring it back into balance. But to bring it back into balance, Mr. President, we're going to have to look long-term. We can't do it on $30 billion of difference in now to the end of the fiscal year spending. The fiscal year ends October 1, so we can't do it. We have to have a 10-year plan. We have to have clear cuts in spending, and we have to start working toward a balanced budget in a responsible way. Now, I can't say I agree with everything in it, but one of the House Budget Committee chairman, one of the Republicans in the House, has proposed a budget that would do exactly that. It would get us to a balanced budget. And now we need to start talking about the plans that he has put forward. The President hasn't, but Congressman Ryan has. We're going to change some of it, I hope, but we should have the same goal, and that is to get to a balanced budget over a period of time, 5 to 10 years. But we certainly are not going to do it in the next 24 hours talking about $30 billion or $36 billion going for the next 6 months. So I hope that we will settle this issue so we can go to the long-term issues. The long-term issue is going to happen in about a month and a half, when we're going to be called on to raise the debt ceiling. The debt's $14 trillion. We're looking at a deficit this year alone, of $1.5 trillion. If we go with the budget that the President submitted, $1.5 trillion more over $14 trillion. No wonder the people of this country are up in arms. And we need to listen to the people of this country who say, stop doing business in Washington the way it's always been done. Stop it now and start cutting back on the appetite for spending so that we will be able to have the balanced budget that we can see in our future. Mr. President, what we're looking at now is the potential of a government shutdown. I hope that it does not come to that. But there is one thing that we ought to be able to do in this Congress, and that is at least protect our military who are serving in Afghanistan and Iraq, and their families who are back home, worried enough about them because of where they are, and most certainly should not have another burden put on them of not knowing if their paycheck is going to come at the normal time of the month, the 1st and the 15th. So I have introduced Senate Bill 724. I want to ask unanimous consent to add Senator Sessions as a co-sponsor.
Without objection.
And I will say that that makes our 46th co-sponsor of Senate Bill 724. That is a very simple bill. It just says that if there's a government shutdown, the military will be paid. And the Secretary of Defense will have the discretion to also pay the civilians and those who are serving our military, so that the food service in Afghanistan and Iraq will not be stopped because we have a government shutdown and the paychecks aren't going to come. I want to alleviate any fear on the part of any member of our military overseas that whose family is watching the debate in the House and on the Senate floor and watching this play out and thinking, am I going to be able to pay the mortgage on time? I want to alleviate that fear right now. I hope that we will be able to pass this bill that is gaining sponsors about every 15 minutes as people start looking at the looming shutdown of government that will happen about a little later than this tomorrow night if we don't have an agreement. I think all of us should put our military in the front line and say, they're going to show up for work. Let's assure them that their pay will not be delayed. That is not the message they're getting right now, but I think we can assure that they will get it. And Mr. President, I have a letter that we just received from the National Association of Uniformed Services, which says, on behalf of more than 180,000 members and supporters of the National Association for Uniformed Services, I offer our full support for your legislation, Senate Bill 724, the Ensuring Pay for Our Military Act of 2011. And I ask unanimous consent to put this letter in the record.
Without objection.
So, Mr. President, I hope that we come to agreement and do not shut the government down. We are so close to getting this temporary fiscal year, which we are already halfway through, finished, and let's take this off the books, because what we ought to be doing right now is focusing on the 2012 budget that starts October 1st, where we're having our hearings and we're asking our questions and we're trying to set our priorities with a lower scale of government. And we are going to cut back way below what we spent last year and the year before, but we're going to prioritize our spending. We had the FBI Director, Mueller, testify before our Commerce Justice Committee, our subcommittee of appropriations, to talk about the law enforcement needs of our FBI. I want to spend my time talking about the needs of the FBI and the other functions of government that we must do, and certainly our Armed Services Bill. And I don't want to be talking about shutting down government in the middle of the fiscal year because we are not coming together on $6 billion or $3 billion. I don't know exactly where they are now, but it's not very much in the scheme of things. What we need to do is get this behind us, alleviate the fears of our military personnel, alleviate the fears of their families that they might have a hiatus in their paychecks. And we need to start the big picture thinking. And the big picture, Mr. President, what we must focus on is cutting spending so that we can go toward a balanced budget and agree on a 5 to 10 year trajectory that will put us back in a fiscally responsible position for our country to have the credibility in the world that we should have, for our children to be debt-free for what we have used in government in this country. We don't need to pass that debt to our children if we are responsible stewards of both their lives and our taxpayer dollars. And, Mr. President, we need to be the leaders that people expect us to be. The people spoke in very loud terms last November that they do not want more spending, and I hear it everywhere I go. I hear it in the airports, on the streets, when I'm talking to people in informal meetings, at the grocery store. People are scared to death of a $14 trillion debt. It has never been so high in our country before. I don't want that to be the legacy of this Congress and our generation. That is not the legacy that we should have as leaders of the greatest country in the free world. So I implore the leaders of Congress and the President to get the continuing resolution behind us so that we can focus on the big picture, and that is the $14 trillion debt that we are facing right now, and doing the responsible cutting that will begin to cut back on the deficits and take down the debt and address the issues that have not been addressed for all these years once and for all. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to commend the senator from Texas for her bill, which I'm very proud to be a co-sponsor